My name is Surinder S Jodhka. I teach sociology at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, and I have been working in this project on Wealth Elites along with Arup and the team. It's important to study everything, and I think we need to look at inequalities, and people have been talking about inequalities, but the tendency among scholars who talk about inequalities is to look at the lower end of society. We tend to find it's unnecessary to study or research the upper end of society. Even general elites or political elites are not studied as much as the poor or those who are on the margins are studied. So I think it's very important to understand complexities of the elite spaces, and there are many different kinds of elites. Wealth elite is increasingly becoming very important even for politics, because they are not only running businesses. In order to run their businesses, they also want to control political process. So they fund political parties, they themselves come into parliaments, and also the nature of wealth is changing. If social composition of the wealth changes, their in some sense understandings and their priorities for political process would also change. So there are many other things, and obviously for inequality, understanding inequality, we need to see how much wealth concentration is, and is there a process of expansion, mobility, are there new people coming from lower end of society into the wealthy space, or is it largely a reproduction of a small set of people? Is it becoming smaller, or it's kind of expanding? These are very important historical questions, because they tell us about the direction in which that society is going, who is more influential, and because they are influential, they don't only influence policymakers, they also influence everything else in society. They decide which places to develop, which cities to grow, what kind of infrastructure should be there, what kind of housing should be there, what kind of food people should eat. So all these things are obviously very critical, apart from obviously the other things also that are important. Most of the research on wealth inequality has been conducted by economists using economic indices like income and wealth, and then wealth is obviously operationalized in terms of buildings, land, financial assets and stuff like that. So, and then they tend to compare that, top 1% or top 10% or top 0.1% owns this much proportion of wealth. That's a very good way of entering the field. But once you have done that, then we also need to see who exactly is the wealthy person, right? There are other issues of identity, other issues of exclusion, that is everyone likely to be wealthy? If you look at wealthy all over the world, most of them are likely to be men. And not only just men, they are likely to be from certain kind of racial and social background. In context of India, caste becomes very important, because we have had caste hierarchies. And if you look at even the processes of mobility, if you look at new wealth, all those, say for example 500 people who have become wealthy over the last 20 years, you would find 90% of them coming from specific social categories or social groups in terms of caste, gender, or community, or regions. So I think these are very important political processes, but also they are academic questions, because that tells you who is likely to be on the margins of the society, and who is. And once you have a wealthy person in the community, it kind of percolates down in many different ways. And these are kind of important questions that one needs to raise when one is studying wealth, beyond simply in terms of counting money and income and assets. Yeah, I mean, wealth is, as I said earlier, mostly studied by economists, and economists have their perspective, which is very useful, but they also are unable to see other dynamics in society, questions of exclusion. Wealth is not simply a kind of descriptive point of owning something. Wealth is also a relationship, in the sense that you extract wealth from somewhere. If you own land, that means if you own large plots of land, if thousands of acres of land, that means there would be thousands of people who don't own any land at all. So these are relational structures, and this is how inequality is structured. And if we have to think about a good society, if we have to think about poverty, if we have to think about social cohesion, we need to engage with these questions, and that's why we need other social scientists to come into framing of those questions. For example, wealth is not something that people are against. I mean, everybody wants to own a little bit so that you feel secure. All of us have a little bit of wealth. Even poorest of the poor person will also have a few clothes or maybe a little bit of jewelry somewhere. So they would want to have that. Wealth is a kind of seen as a positive value, and that is also changing. But at the same time, big wealth is qualitatively a different reality. So I think these are the questions that we need to raise from a kind of anthropological perspective, from sociological perspective, and economics, and obviously question of gender, question of identities. All these are in some sense connected. And when we are talking about wealth, we need to take them into account if we want to kind of recognize and understand its complexity.